And talking of albums that never saw the light of day, I actually did an album with them up in the Highlands of Scotland, which never saw the light of day. It's one of the most bizarre records I've ever been involved in, but one of the most amazing times. It was trying to grasp what the record was supposed to be, and I think the label thought we were going up into a mountain to record this masterpiece that was going to become a commercial success for the band. And it soon became clear we were definitely not there to record a commercial success. So we had FX Rentals, or Dream Hire might have been back then. We had them drive to northern Scotland, place Ackle-to-Booey, which is about 26 miles north of Ullapool, so right up there. We had them bring a studio, and the studio was on the side of a mountain, so you couldn't get the van. So the equipment had to all be carried down this mountain to this cabin of a boat that belonged to John from the band. It was his uncle's, I think.
Right.
So there was a cabin of a boat. His favourite boat had been transported to the side of a mountain that had no road and direct access. So it was like, I think, an 18-hour drive for this van to come up from London, and then the guy had to, all of us, and it was like minus, I don't know, there was like 6 foot of snow as well. It's like -7. And the studio had to be built in this cabin.
Right.
And we spent a couple of weeks up there just travelling around with portable DAT players and recording everything we could find, whether it be barrels on a beach or stones or monuments, or just creating all these samples and noises and sounds. And then we take them back to this cabin on the side of a mountain, and I'd play all the tapes, sometimes the same time, sometimes one after another, and they'd all have headphones on getting a feed of that, and they'd play along. Right. And they'd be thinking, right, this is the bit where we start doing that rhythm on the beach, and this is where we'll add a bass line, all with their headphones on, so nobody knew what the other person was going to do. Sometimes we just read books and we recorded that. Sometimes everyone would just get really stoned and just kind of tell stupid stories. Other times we would just try and talk in Japanese, and that was a song, and we'd have to put atmospherics. Crazy. There was no. I have to know what it was. There was no structure whatsoever. No structure whatsoever to that. That was just record sounds, an atmospheric album. I think maybe the label had been forcing them into trying to make guitar records on their second album and stuff and be more commercial. That wasn't what they were about. So maybe there was a slight protest in that. I don't know, or whether they wanted to make something completely anti that. It really didn't go down well with the label whatsoever. There's kind of artist power. And I don't think that at the time they thought they had power and could do what the hell they wanted to. I don't think that was it. I think it was just, we've got this budget to make this album. Let's go and see what happens. Let's do something completely out there in typical Beat Band fashion. Let's do something mind-blowing. And also, it's bonding thing. We're up in these mountains, staying in these cabins overlooking the Summer Isles, amazing, on a beach. And like drinking in the local pubs. And it's right in the middle of nowhere. And it was... yeah, loads of shit went on. Loads of crazy antics went on. So we had a great time. So the camaraderie and the kind of bonding thing was good. I don't know. Yeah, we had so many hours and hours and hours of footage and atmosphere and music and, pushing cars off cliffs and recording that and just craziness to try and, would have taken weeks and weeks and weeks, and we would have lost our minds if we tried to put it into an album.
How do you mic up a car being pushed off a cliff?
Right. So what happens here is the technical method of this is find a young Welsh person called Brino, get him to have 2 portable DAT players with belt clips either side on his belt, and 2 Sony stereo microphones into said DAT players. Drive along the Scottish countryside in the middle of nowhere until you find an old car on top of a cliff. Then make Brino climb down the cliff into the sea and stand on rocks at the bottom of the cliff. No health and safety here. We weren't working for the BBC. So... So we kind of got this track, right, and we'd been working on it, and it was where we were doing like pebbles and barrels on a beach, and it kind of builds up, and there was car windows going up and down for the rhythm. We'd recorded that going along and stuff like this. And this track had a big crescendo, and we were kind of like, like in Day of the Life when it builds and builds, and then 5 million pianos do a note at the end. Well, what happens if ours weren't 5? What happens if our crescendo finished with the crash of a car being pushed off a cliff? and hitting rocks in the sea. Everyone was like, brilliant. And I was like, brilliant, until I realised, I'd have to record it. So I find a way down. I'm literally, it's a wild, wild, wild ocean. There's like 30-foot waves crashing these rocks on this cliff face. And I found these, like, walked out a bit into the middle of the sea. I'm standing on these rocks. And I'm looking up, and they're all up there, thumbs up, like laughing their heads off, because they're like, he's actually down there doing this. And I'm thinking, one big wave and I'm gone. I'm swept off, And they're just shouting, don't go in, you'll lose all the great stuff we've recorded today. Don't go in, because the DATs will be ruined. So,
don't worry about your life.
Yeah, the DATs will be swept away. They'll end up in, in America at some point. But so I'm there, and they're pushing off, and I'm standing there just holding these two mics in the air like this and thinking, this is the worst idea we've ever had. And they're pushing it. At first, it just wouldn't budge. It had obviously been there a while. It was all rested, this car. First, it didn't budge. And then all of a sudden, it got a bit of give, a bit of momentum. And they're kind of like going with it. And at first, I thought they were going to go over the cliff with it, because it just flew. And then there's that silence of when the car's just in midair. And I'm thinking, like, is this just going to explode into a million pieces and hit me in the face? Because I'm not that far away from it. But it didn't. It just hit the rocks and just went into smithereens, and obviously met with loads of cheers and high fives from the top of the cliff. And that was that. I had to climb back up, got it, listened back to it, checked we had it. It was amazing, with the sounds of the waves and the rocks and everything in the background, and then the whoosh as it came off, and then the big crash. So a good night was had that night. I think we paid 50 quid each for a shot of whiskey in the local pub just to celebrate. And then I remember the label booked us a big mix room in London and said, really excited to hear the mixes. We booked you the mix room, come down, mix the record. And I'm thinking, what am I going to mix? I got 72 hours of waves, wave sounds. And it was just, it never saw the light of day. But